你还不知道吧？有个国家
Did you know there's a country that's almost been bought up by Chinese people? That's right, it's Panama. Last year, a large number of foreigners who gained Panamanian residency were Chinese. So what's drawing so many Chinese people to Panama? The reason is simple. It's incredibly easy to get a green card there. All it takes is buying a house for 300,000 US dollars, and 3 generations of your family can get Panamanian residency. No language requirement, no education requirement, and the whole process can be approved in as fast as 2 to 3 months. With this residency, my entire family can travel freely to over 130 countries and regions, including Italy, Portugal, and Malta. Just go whenever we want. On top of that, Panama is part of the US E2 visa treaty, which is one of the main reasons I choose this country. This way, I can use it as a stepping stone to get my children into the US for a top quality education. After my children complete their studies, our whole family can move to Spain for 2 years, and by then we'll qualify for Spanish passports. Yes, you heard that right. With a Spanish passport, we'll be able to travel across Europe with no restrictions. What do you all think of my plan? In recent years, Panama, a small Central American country, has become a hotspot among Chinese immigrants. Immigration ads have flooded social media. Some agencies emphasize Panama's business-friendly tax policies, making it an attractive destination for offshore companies. Foreign income is tax-free. Goods moving in and out of free trade zones are exempt from fees, and there are no foreign exchange controls, allowing for easy cross-border capital flows. One immigration consultant explained.
有人跟我说巴拿马很穷，别看这个地方小。
Who is Panama best suited for? I say Chinese business owners. With many countries imposing sanctions on Chinese entrepreneurs, Panama, a friendly gateway to Central and South America, offers new business opportunities through residency.
In 2017, Panama cut ties with Taiwan and established a diplomatic relations with China. That same year in November, it became the first Latin American country to join China's Belt and Road Initiative. Since then, Panama has signed a free trade agreement with China, and bilateral trade has steadily grown. Thanks to its strategic location and open economic policies, Panama has become a key destination for Chinese investment. The Colón Free Trade Zone, often called Panama's ACE, in attracting foreign investment, is the largest free trade zone in the Western Hemisphere. It allows businesses to engage in re-export trade with significant tax benefits. Export income is exempt from corporate tax, and import and exports are free from custom duties and value-added tax. After the US-China trade war began in 2018, the zone's tariff-free access to markets like the US and the EU made it a crucial hub for Chinese products entering Latin America. Data shows that in recent years, Chinese private and state-owned enterprises have invested billions of US dollars in Panama. According to China's Ministry of Commerce, as of 2023, more than 40 Chinese companies were operating in Panama, with 20 setting up their regional headquarters there. Their businesses span trade, finance, shipping, infrastructure, logistics, and real estate. Additionally, over 100 private Chinese companies are now engaged in trade in the Colón Free Trade Zone. To attract Chinese investment, Panama's immigration authorities introduced a special policy in 2018 allowing Chinese nationals to obtain permanent residency. Under this rule, Chinese citizens with a temporary residency permit for at least 2 years can apply for permanent residency. The National Immigration Service clarified that this policy applies exclusively to Chinese nationals, drawing significant interest from the Chinese community. As of 2023, Panama had a population of 4.5 million, with around 300,000 Chinese immigrants, making up about 7% of the total, mostly in Panama's province. However, recent figures from Chinese immigration agencies suggest that the Chinese population in Panama has risen to 17%, with strong representation in business and politics. This number cannot be independently verified, but it indicates a surge in Chinese immigration to Panama in recent years. Now, with the Panama Canal emerging as a key point of US-China tensions, the future of Chinese investment and immigration in Panama remains uncertain. On February 6, Panamanian President José Raúl Mulino announced that the country had formally notified Beijing of its decision to withdraw from the Belt and Road infrastructure projects, making Panama the first Latin American nation to do so.
Nuestro embajador en Beijing.
Our ambassador in Beijing submitted the necessary documents as required by the agreement, which states that cancellations must be announced 90 days in advance. This is my decision. As for those who signed the agreement with China, I don't know their motives. That's for you to assess. What has this brought to Panama over the years?
Mulino stressed that this decision was not made at Washington's request. He said he is taking time to evaluate Panama's relationship with China and determine what best serves the country's national interests. His remark suggests he does not see significant benefits from the Belt and Road Initiative. Panama joined China's Belt and Road Initiative under former President Juan Carlos Varela. Varela was also the one who decided to establish diplomatic ties with China and cut ties with Taiwan. Later, he was accused of being involved in millions of dollars in unexplained funds and conducting secretive negotiations with China. In 2019, he was forced out of office amid a major corruption scandal. Spanish media once exposed a private conversation between Varela and Panama's former Maritime Authority chief. The recording suggested that China provided financial aid to Panama in exchange for diplomatic recognition. There were rumors that China secretly gave Panama $114 million, but the money never entered the country's treasury. One of the largest Belt and Road infrastructure projects in Panama, the Panama Canal Colón container port, which was funded by China, became mired in controversy. After 4 years of construction, the project stalled and the Chinese company involved owed millions of dollars in unpaid land rent to the local government. Other Chinese-led Belt and Road projects in Panama also faced difficulties, which may have contributed to Mulino's frustration. On February 2nd, Mulino met with visiting U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. During this meeting, Rubio warned Panama that it must immediately reduce what former President Donald Trump called China's influence in the Panama Canal region. He suggested that failure to do so could lead to retaliation and sanctions from the U.S. Mulino had previously rejected discussions with Trump's new administration about the control of the Panama Canal. However, shortly after Rubio's visit, he announced that Panama would not renew its Memorandum of Understanding on Belt and Road cooperation with China in 2026. Under the agreement, Belt and Road membership automatically renews every 3 years unless one party decides to terminate it. Panama had renewed the agreement twice, in 2020 and 2023. Mulino later went further, announcing that Panama would completely withdraw from Belt and Road projects rather than waiting until 2026. The Associated Press noted that this move appeared to be a concession to the U.S. Many Chinese commentators believe that after more than a decade of efforts, China's influence in Panama is now at risk of collapsing. Some pointed out that Chinese businesses, which had thrived under the Belt and Road strategy, may now face serious losses with little chance of recovering their investments. One online comment captured the frustration. China and Panama have been in a long-term relationship. Panama accepted the dowry, held the wedding, and then suddenly ran off with someone else after getting a flirtatious glance. And before leaving, it even said, "We're just not compatible. Take care of yourself." Now China is left with nothing, standing alone in the wind. What was supposed to be a business deal, China mistook it for true love. However, some believe Panama's decision was merely a symbolic gesture under the U.S. pressure. They argue that despite officially leaving the Belt and Road Initiative, China's influence in Panama remains deeply rooted and will not be easily erased. Regarding Panama's announcement on February 7th, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ling Jian responded at a regular press briefing.
方对美国通过施压胁迫的手段
China firmly opposes the U.S.'s coercive tactics to undermine Belt and Road cooperation and regrets Panama's decision not to renew the Memorandum of Understanding.
This is China's latest official statement on the issue. Given Panama's importance to Beijing and China's history of behind-the-scenes maneuvering, there may be more going on beneath the surface. Recently, online sources claim that reports circulating within Beijing's political circles suggest China is using deception in the Panama Canal dispute. According to these claims, Panama's decision to withdraw from the Belt and Road Initiative is actually part of its Chinese strategy to mislead the United States. The theory suggests that China believes Panama cannot resist U.S. pressure. As a result, President Xi Jinping, through diplomatic channels, allegedly advised Panama's president to publicly announce the decision to withdraw from the agreement. The goal, according to these claims, was to ease US pressures while keeping the situation in the Panama Canal unchanged. That means maintaining control of two key ports at both ends of the canal through Hong Kong-based companies. Additionally, Beijing's observers reveal that Chinese authorities have instructed various Chinese and Hong Kong-owned businesses in Panama to allocate funds specifically for inciting anti-US protests. According to these sources, this plan is already being carried out. Western media reported that during US Secretary of State Marco Rubio's visit to Panama, about 200 demonstrators marched through the capital waving Panamanian flags and chanting slogans such as "Rubio, get out of Panama," and "Long live national sovereignty." When riot police blocked the protesters near the presidential palace, some demonstrators burned banners featuring images of Donald Trump and Marco Rubio in anger. Reports suggest that these so-called Panamanian protesters opposing the US were actually paid by China. According to sources within Beijing's political circles, hiring someone to take part in the protest cost less than $100 per person. These kinds of covert operations are something China frequently engages in overseas and has perfected over the years. In support of Panama's anti-US movement, China's ambassador to Panama, Xu Xueyuan, published an article in La Estrella de Panama on February 3rd. In the piece, she sharply criticized the U.S. delegation's visit, calling it a tropical storm that undermines Panama's sovereignty. She argued that China offers Panama opportunities for development while the real threat to the canal comes from the United States. Meanwhile, online sources have claimed that following Panama's decision to withdraw from the Belt and Road Initiative, authorities also ordered the removal of all Chinese language signs and symbols along the Panama Canal, as well as Chinese flags and related elements. Reports suggest that Chinese-funded projects including high-speed rail, metro lines, port terminals, 5G infrastructure, and schools have all been suspended and placed under review. These moves appear to signal President Mulio's determination to distance Panama from China. This information could not be independently verified. However, after meeting with Rubio on February 2nd, President Jose Raul Mulino stated that Panamanian authorities will review certain Chinese companies operating in the country. Among them is a major 25-year concession renewed in 2021, which allows Hong Kong-based CK Hutchison Holdings to manage ports at both entrances of the Panama Canal. The investigation will reportedly focus on whether the agreement involves collusion between government officials and private business interests or harmed Panama's national interest. The results are expected by the end of February. Bloomberg, citing sources familiar with the matter, reported that Mulino is weighing the possibility of cancelling CK Hutchison Holdings' concession. However, sources emphasize that no final decision has been made and the government intend to handle the matter carefully to avoid legal disputes and follow due process. Mulino stated, "We have to wait until that audit ends before we can reach our legal conclusion and act accordingly." According to Bloomberg, 2 lawyers filed a lawsuit on February 3rd, challenging CK Hutchison Holdings' contract, arguing that it violates Panama's constitution. One of the lawyers, Norman Castro, stated that the concession agreement grants excessive tax benefits and hands over large areas of land to the port operator, which goes against the constitutional principle that public interest must take precedence over private interests. A Chinese military commentator known online as Warblade 007 analyzed 3 possible scenarios for future negotiations over control of the canal. The first scenario is that Li Ka-shing accepts compensation and exits, allowing a U.S. company to take over. The second is that the U.S. military directly intervenes, leaving Li Ka-shing with total losses. The third is that China steps in, forcing the U.S. to maintain the status quo. Associate Professor Jia Ilian Chong of Political Science at the National University of Singapore commented that the Panamanian government is weighing its options. On one hand, UN sanctions could cause greater damage to Panama than the benefits it receives from China's Belt and Road Initiative. On the other hand, with China's economy slowing in recent years, Beijing has scaled back its investment, with President Xi Jinping shifting Belt and Road focus towards small and beautiful projects. This has made trade, investment, and economic stimulus under the initiative far less attractive than before. Historically, Panama has experienced U.S. military interventions and political influence, so Trump's strong rhetoric could trigger negative historical associations. However, the current Panamanian government has a friendly stance towards Washington and is more willing to adjust its policies accordingly. That said, Chong pointed out that while Panama's withdrawal from Belt and Road may ease concerns within the U.S. defense establishment, it will not stop China from continuing to expand its economic influence in the country. The Panama Canal is a key military stronghold for the U.S., allowing it to project power between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. The U.S. military has long been uneasy about China's investment in Panama. Before his visit, Marco Rubio stated that he'd had no doubt China had a contingency plan to shut down the canal in the event of a conflict with the U.S. He also said Washington was determined to address this national security threat. There are 5 major ports along the Panama Canal. Besides the 2 operated by PPC, the others are managed by private companies from the U.S., Singapore, and Taiwan. Notably, after concluding his visit to Panama, Rubio's trip was followed by a post from the U.S. State Department on February 5th. The post was posted on X, announcing that U.S. government vessels can now transit the Panama Canal for free, saving the U.S. government millions of dollars each year. The Panama Canal Authority, an autonomous agency under the supervision of the Panamanian government, disputed the U.S., stating that it had not made any adjustments to transit fees. It also expressed willingness to engage in discussions with U.S. officials and said it would optimize priority passage for American vessels. President Mulino also denied that the country had reached an agreement allowing U.S. military ships to transit the Panama Canal for free. Speaking at a press conference on February 6, he completely rejected the U.S. State Department's statement. However, Mulino noted that he had already explained to the U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth that under Panama's constitution and legal framework, the president does not have the authority to set, raise, or waive canal transit fees. He took a firm stance, stating that while the Panamanian government understands the political dynamics in the U.S., it will not bow to pressure or make decisions that violate democratic principles. On February 6, at a press conference in the Dominican Republic, Rubio stated,
USAID. Okay. Yes, please. Thanks. I'm not confused about Panama. We had conversations. I felt there were strong first steps. We have expectations we made clear in those conversations. I respect very much.
President Mulino had been scheduled to hold a phone call with the U.S. President Donald Trump at 3:30 p.m. on February 7th. While Mulino did not disclose the topics of discussion, many expected that Panama Canal to be one of the agenda. However, due to a last-minute change in Trump's schedule, the call was postponed. The Foreign Ministry said that new date would be announced after coordination between the 2 countries. In recent weeks, Trump has repeatedly stated his intention to reclaim control of the Panama Canal, citing threats from China. The canal was constructed by the U.S. in 1904 and officially opened in 1914, becoming one of the world's most critical trade routes. The U.S. controlled the canal for 85 years. In 1977, the U.S. and the Panama signed the Panama Canal Treaty, which outlined the terms for its transfer. Under the agreement, the U.S. handed over control of the canal to the Panama in 1999. The treaty mandates that the canal must remain permanently neutral and open to vessels from all nations. It also prohibits Panama from granting any third-party rights or concessions that could compromise the canal's neutrality. Additionally, the treaty acknowledges that the U.S. and Panama share a common interest in the security and protection of the canal. If its neutrality is threatened, the U.S. has a right to take action to defend it.